where do Labour's first steps actually lead?
If you don't have a plan, how can you possibly be trusted to lead our country?
Our offer is to reset both our economy and our politics, so that they once again serve the interests of working people.
At the very beginning of the year, some folk may remember, I tried to look ahead at this election year and give my sense of what was likely to happen. I'm going to come on in a moment to Labour's 6 steps, their absolutely core campaigning tool for the election. But before we do, I want to say that right at the beginning of the year, I said that I thought too much miserablism, too much pessimism about the state of the economy and in particular inflation and interest rates would be a big mistake for the Labour Party. And so I think it is proving inflation and interest rates are part of the story the government wants to tell that's going well.
Inflation is back to normal. This is proof that the plan and priorities I set out are working.
And secondly, I said that I thought that the polls would narrow. Well, they haven't narrowed yet, but I still think they will. And third, I said that this would resolve into an argument between two big parties whose view of macroeconomic getting and spending was remarkably similar. And that is where I think we are right now. But let's go back to those 6 first steps, because I think the overwhelmingly obvious daft laddie question is 6 steps to where? To which Keir Starmer's team will immediately reply, well, you know that, there's the 5 missions. And that's absolutely true. An awful lot of thinking, a lot of planning has gone into these 5 missions right across the policy agenda. But the truth is, most people don't read mission statements. They don't read great big bulky policy papers. And I think between the 6 steps, the campaigning tool, and the 5 missions, the granular work of what Labour Party would actually do in government, there is an enormous gap. And it's the gap which says, but what is the Labour Party for? What is all this for? Where are we going? What is the kind of country that Keir Starmer hopes to create for all of us after 5 or 10 years in power? What does it feel like? And these are things that can't be reduced to bullet points and don't appear in this form in campaign documents. I think Keir Starmer needs to start to make some big speeches, running towards arguments, engaging with arguments, not running away from them, being much less cautious perhaps than the 6 steps are, because these are 6 steps designed really to win the hearts and minds of corduroy-wearing Britain. And that is not discreditable. These one nation conservative-minded people want a safe, secure country in which people feel basically a bit happier than they do at the moment. But in the end, one nationism can never, ever be enough for a Labour government. Apart from the house-building record of the Harold Macmillan government after the war, one nationism has never given working class or left behind Britain much to go on. It is really a creed for the comfortably off, slightly smug, well-meaning and well-doing middle English conservative classes. These are people who want life to carry bumbling smoothly on, who have no great anger or outrage about the excesses of the super-rich or the corruption of the super-rich, who don't really have a reform agenda for the country as a whole. They're probably NIMBYs. They don't really want much more house building. They want to feel good about the working classes. They want to feel that we are all one family, one nation, conservatism. But they don't really want to do very much for people who need more help, need more power and need more money. So I think in plugging the gap between the first steps and the 5 missions, Keir Starmer and his team need to start painting a much bigger and broader picture of the kind of Britain they want to create. They need to go beyond simply saying to the country, you know, the Tories messed up. Well, the Tories did mess up, and we'll understand that. They need to start to say, and so we are going to do this or that differently. In other words, they need to start to run towards difficult arguments. And if I'm looking for some examples, I was really struck by the former Prime Minister and Chancellor Gordon Brown recently talking about the scourge of child poverty, the 3.6 million children stuck in poverty, the worst child poverty in our lifetimes, and his burning sense of anger and outrage and the urgency of doing something about child poverty.
70% of the children in poverty are in families where someone is working. This is not the work-shy or the indolent. These are families where people are working, but they just cannot make ends meet. And that's what's got to change.
Now, Gordon Brown, being Brown, has a kind of Brownian motion idea about how to deal with this without adding hugely to extra public spending. It's to do with the way the Bank of England treats interest with commercial banks. And it's very complicated, but it's well thought through, Brown being Brown. And I think that Keir Starmer needs to think quite hard about the issue, particularly of child poverty in this country, and start to give us more than one day we'll be able to do something about it. Because if you look at the most urgent part of this, which is the cap on benefits, the two-child cap under universal credit, and campaigners say that if you got rid of that cap, you would instantly, more or less, lift 250,000 children in this country out of poverty. If you look at that, and you look at what the Labour Party says about it, I talk to shadow cabinet ministers all the time, and they tell me again and again they loathe the two-child cap, they hate the two-child cap, something must be done about the two-child cap. But when you get them, like Wes Streeting recently, in front of a microphone, and you say to Wes Streeting, Wes, the Archbishop of Canterbury says the two-child cap is a disgrace and must go. He goes,
that's not a commitment I'm able to make today.
And the reason for that is, of course, the really tough, stringent Rachel Reeves and Pat McFadden grasp on the public finances, that number one first step, that number one mission, economic stability. But it does mean that the Labour Party's ability to explain what it is for as a party is severely circumscribed. I think we need to have more hope and more of a plan on child poverty than we've seen so far, and I want to hear Keir Starmer talking about it. Another example, obviously, is climate change, because the Green Prosperity Plan under Ed Miliband is no longer fundamentally, apparently, about saving the planet or net zero or the country going carbon neutral. It has been very shrewdly repurposed as being about the cost of living crisis. It's about keeping energy bills down in the future by investing more in clean energy at home.
Clean energy we control at home is cheaper than fossil fuels and more secure because dictators can't control it.
In a sense, it is tilted much more towards Rachel Reeves's securonomics than an existential terror about where a heating planet is going. Now, that's all very well, but if you look at the state of public argument about net zero and global warming at the moment, it's pretty clear that between the oppositionist antics of Just Stop Oil on the one hand and the immensely smug conservative can't do that naysaying of the big oil-funded mainstream media on the other, the argument is being lost. We are no longer talking really about the importance of saving the planet, as we should be doing. We're talking about smaller things like energy bills. Energy bills, very, very important, particularly in an election campaign. But again, I think there needs to be more of the big vision. I think Keir Starmer, Ed Miliband and the rest of them need to be talking more about the existential threat to the planet. Because I think out there, middle British voters understand this now pretty well. They understand the science. They're scared by the science. They know something big needs to happen. And they know it means sacrifices, both by the government and by all of us to get there. So I think on energy, on saving the planet, on child poverty, there are examples of things that Keir Starmer needs to get out there and talk about more. I think you can't just rely on the toolkit of 6 steps. Here, hand it to you, that's very straightforward. And you can't just say, well, we've done an awful lot of work behind the scenes on policy. You have to get out there. There needs to be more rhetoric. There needs to be more uplift. At the moment, the hard left are constantly saying of Starmer and the Labour Party, betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. And frankly, whatever Starmer did, the hard left would be crying betrayal, because that's what they do. They think anybody who compromises enough to get anywhere near power is by definition a traitor. And on the other side, you have got the big, still very, very powerful mainstream conservative media saying any change is impossible. It's all childish. You can't do this. You can't do that. Trying to close off the prospect of any real amelioration or improvement in national life. But most people live in the gap between the two, the hard left and the conservative naysayers. And this summer, I think all of us need more hope, more vision, and more optimism.